Welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here with my brother from another mother, my Artner. You know him as quite possibly the most interesting man in the world, the one and only Wes Brown.
Todd, how you doing, my friend? Oh my God, it's another week.
I know, another week. We have another fantastic guest this week. I can't wait to talk with her. First Fridays is in full swing now that it's spring. So I'm excited to get out and about and see some art. Hopefully we can get you down to Denver sometime soon and go out and see some art together, brother.
Yeah. So First Friday is tomorrow. Well, while we're recording it is tomorrow. Here we go. Because we're on this delayed release. Have you been to any First Fridays yet? Have they started, or is this like the kickoff for the First Friday?
No, First Friday is always going on, but you see a lot more people out and about in the springtime. Everybody has that energy. Everybody's energized. They're ready to get out, listen to some music, see some art, eat some good food. So
yeah, no, that sounds great.
You have spring fever?
I do have spring fever. I'm chomping at the bit. We had snow the other day, but that's going to stop.
You hope.
Although in the world we live in, who knows what's going to happen?
Anything could happen, brother.
That's right. Hey, but here we have a great artist on, so I'm really excited. Should we get to it?
Let's get to it.
All right.
Before we get to this week's guest, remember to check out our website, tenantpodcast.com, where you can access all our episodes and follow us on social media on our Tenant Podcast Facebook page and on Instagram at Tenant Podcast. Our guest this week is an internationally exhibited multidisciplinary artist. Whose work spans 3D and 2D in the form of wearables, sculpture, installation, fiber art, and art on paper. She currently resides in Greensboro, North Carolina. Welcome to the program, Thea Clark. Thea, how are you?
Hey, guys. I am super great. Really happy to be here.
I was so close to messing up your name there for a second. So close.
I am so proud of you.
I know. It was like, if you could see the inside of my brain, those zeros and the ones going, there was like a stutter there for a second, like that kind of that Max Headroom thing, remember Max Headroom?
Yeah.
The Coke commercials where,
yeah,
kind of hang up there for a second.
So the gig is up. Now everybody knows Todd is actually digital.
I should be digital.
You're digital and I'm analog.
We're going to start using that, man.
There we go.
Before we get started with the interview, I want to direct everybody to your website, Thea. It's theaclark.com, TheaClark.com. Check it out. Beautiful work. So let's start off by talking about your involvement with art and how this all began, because you were involved with art, it sounds like, fairly early on. You were a performance artist, you were a dancer and an actor, stage actor, but you didn't get into the visual arts until your mid-20s. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's basically correct. Like, I was always doing visual art, but I never really considered it as a path, probably because my mother told me I should go to art school like she did. And I thought, well, I'm not sure that worked out so great for you. So I'm not sure it's really what I wanted to do at that time. But I was always, I was always doing art, making things, drawing, just sketching people, just, it was kind of always something that was always, in my journal or on my bedside table, or just something I always did. But I didn't understand at that time. I'm not sure I do even right now how artists do their thing, and how they get through it all and how they make a life of it. It's still pretty mysterious. But it was certainly very mysterious then. So going to art school was like not in the cards for me. I was a dancer. I did that for a number of years, all throughout my young years. I ended up after high school going to Europe I worked like through most of high school, and I went to save money, and I took off time. I was supposed to go to college and didn't, and went to Europe. And I was over there, and I was dancing over there, and I auditioned for this group and ended up in a trio doing street performances. So we would busk, basically. This was in London. So we did the choreography, and the guys that I was working with, 2 guys, were starting to do some music, and we were, we'd pass the hat and make money. And then they got a manager, and we did some gigs and did some performances in some different theaters. So, I was, making money doing this. And one day some guy comes up to us and is like, "Oh, I really love your group, and I'd love for you to open for my band. And, you've got to come back and meet everybody." And so, London was a really small place, and it felt like it was really easy to kind of get connected and to just have these doors, like it was sort of starving for content. I don't know why at that time, but it just seemed like, it was easy for us. And we just got all these gigs and made some kind of a living, and ended up opening for this group at a club called Heaven, which is a big old, enormous, cavernous gay club. And the group that we opened for was called the Eurythmics. And so, like, I remember going to their studio, right? We walked through this, it was like a big warehouse, and the first floor was a wood shop, which like piqued my interest. And then on up into the studio where they were, they were producing stuff for what would become their, whatever their hit record they did was, I forget which one it was, but it was the one right before Annie Lennox did Sweet Dreams. So, it was cool. I was, I loved to write. I was doing some writing. I was totally intimidated because I didn't really have a musical background, and the 2 guys that I was with sort of did, and everyone just sort of kind of faked it until they made it. That was kind of the vibe. So the cool thing, though, was the cool and sort of sad thing was Annie Lennox saying to me, "Any ideas that you have of what I can do on stage, like movement wise?" And I was 18 at the time. So I was like, "Oh, Annie, no, you're great. You're just great. I didn't hop on that bus." You know what I mean? Like, I should have just said, "Yes, I got you. I am your choreographer. Let's get to it." I didn't have the confidence then, so it was just a kind of a fun experience. We spent some time, we hung, we did that show. And then I just was, kind of had a falling out with these 2 guys because they were like megalomaniacs. So it's on to the next thing. So that was
great story.
That is a great story. I love that. And our second artist with connections to the Eurythmics.
I know. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
They were actually very cool. David Stewart was like totally a vegetarian at the time. And not everybody was that, back in those days. And they were very cool, just really down to earth people. I was so impressed the way, they just kind of had a collaborative spirit. I think that's musicians in general, right? They just, like, a lot of people are just open and just seeing what other people can bring to the table. It was a good time. Definitely.
That's awesome. That's a great experience to have, though.
I was somebody who would just go someplace and kind of throw myself in, sink or swim, and just try to figure it out, because I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was really on my, I know that many people go to college and that's where they do their floundering. I was just mostly doing my floundering in the real world. So, and, floundering and figuring, I should say. It wasn't all floundering.
Right. I do most of my floundering throughout my life.
It's ongoing. It's an ongoing process.
It's an ongoing
I feel very comfortable floundering. It's like, it's familiar.
So you are also a stage actress.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, so when I came back, I was living in San Francisco at the time. I did some more shows with, groups in San Francisco. There was a really cool theatrical group called Angels of Light. And they had, and I knew one of the founders of that through a ballet class I was taking, and he asked me to be part of their next show. I didn't realize that I was becoming part of this really group that had a real history in the community. And, there's just a lot of characters that are, continue to work in theater and live performance or tap or drag or costumes professionally for years to come. But for me, I was dancing in that show, and I just got to the point with dance where I felt like I enjoyed it, but I didn't want to be a musical theater actor because I wasn't really a singer. I wasn't going to be a ballet dancer. I didn't really feel like I was in, also on the side, I was in a modern dance troupe. I just felt like I was sort of I wasn't the most creative person in the room. I was more the physical clay for the choreographer. And I was looking for something where I would have a little more input in the creative process. And I thought that would be theater. I also, have always loved reading plays. Like, my mom had plays and I started reading those, when I was 10 years old, her collection of plays. And so, I was fascinated with theater. But it was this fellow that I met with the Angels of Light who told me about an acting teacher. So I started studying with this independent acting teacher. And, the process of studying acting, which I studied with him for 2.5 years, was really a great one because his approach to it was incredibly both physical and psychological, but really combining those two things. So it kind of satisfied my intellect, my emotions, and the desire to sort of be physically engaged. So I still love the theater in a lot of ways. After I studied with him, I auditioned into an internship program in Idaho. Actually, I had been cast in a role in a theater in San Francisco. Now I can't remember the name of it. I think Theater Rhinoceros. It's a gay theater. And it was a kind of a lesbian pulp fiction play that they were doing. And I was supposed to be like, the sweet young thing in it. And I, at the same time, then I got offered this internship at a Shakespeare theater in Idaho. I remember having this conversation with them. I'm like saying, I'm going to take this other thing, but, hang on, I've got really a much better casting for this role than me. My roommate, she's like so right for this role in a way that I never would have been. And they're like, I just don't understand. You're leaving like this lead role in this play and you're going to be an intern. It's like, well, it's what I want to do. I'm really interested in the classics and Shakespeare and you know how it is when you live in some place, no matter how cool that place is, in San Francisco, you just want to get the hell out. Like, that's kind of how I felt too. It's like, I was ready to just move on. So my roommate, got the role. She totally nailed it. She was so like, if I had been casting the two of us, if she had been to the original audition, I am sure she would have gotten it anyway. So, it worked out. It worked out. And I went off to Boise, Idaho for a summer of interning at the Idaho Shakespeare Theater or Shakespeare Festival. And, just had started my life in theater with the goal of getting paid to do it by the time I was 24. I just pulled that age. I pulled that year out of the air and just said, somehow I'm going to make this happen. So one thing led to another. I met someone there who told me about a program in Milwaukee. It's actually another educational program where you could essentially get a certificate or a master's if you didn't have an undergraduate degree. And I didn't have an undergraduate degree. So I thought, well, I really want to go and audition for that. But they only auditioned every 3 years and they just auditioned in a group. So I said, well, let me go check out Milwaukee. And I saw that the Milwaukee Repertory Theater, which is a really, well-established, well-funded regional theater, had an internship program. So I auditioned for that and got that, and then ended up moving in, out to Milwaukee, and ended up staying there for 3 years, ended up getting a job, getting my first job in theater where I was paid at 24, and then continued to be paid. Like, Milwaukee was a super happening place for theater. Like, don't tell those people who live in Chicago, because then they'll start coming up here and taking the jobs. But there was everyone was working. We were all getting paid, and it was really nice. And it was during that time period when I was working in Milwaukee and in and around Wisconsin in theater, where I started making stuff again. I just went out and bought objects from the thrift store and started covering them in paper. And then I started making beads with paper and making that into jewelry. And I thought, well, I can probably sell this stuff. People seem to like it. My friends seem to like it. I had a job in San Francisco where I was working while I was going to college part-time. I was doing sales and trade shows and B2B sales. I knew I was totally comfortable as a salesperson. So I just, walked into some shoe store, got the number of the owner. She had 7 stores, and I made an appointment and brought my little box of stuff, and she placed an order, and I was like, wow, I have to actually make this stuff. So I went back. I had been rehearsing in Madison, Wisconsin. I was doing a show there called The Immigrant with Madison Repertory Theater. And during the day, I was sitting at my little table in my little apartment and making, 40 pairs of earrings, or however many earrings she had ordered. And so that was the first time when I realized, okay, maybe I can do this somehow, figure this out. Maybe I can continue to act, and I can, make something where I feel creative, and that can also help me earn some money. And so that would be cool. So I continued on that path of making and acting until I kind of made a decision to jump ship.
Yeah, that's interesting. The one question, when I heard that you were a dancer and that you did theater, the next question that kind of popped in my head was, so how does those two things influence what you're doing today? Because it's got to be huge, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think honestly, there's no coincidence that I ended up making jewelry or becoming because it's a body-oriented form, right? You have to interact with it. It moves with you. It's sort of part of a costume in a way, I think that was a natural direction for me to go, much more so than just starting out as just being a sculptor or doing installation. It was a different kind of progression for me. The jewelry made sense from that perspective, also because I kind of understood how to monetize it in a way that I didn't understand how to monetize anything else. And when I was back in San Francisco, I was able to take some specific technique classes, and I just kind of landed in a group of, I got to know a group of makers, other makers. There were a lot of them in San Francisco at the time. And I ended up doing an apprenticeship with one of them and going with her to her craft shows. I'd never been to craft shows before. I knew they existed, but I'd never really ever been to one. So the first time I ever went to one was when I was, helping someone else set up a booth, being in the booth and selling her stuff and, doing all of that. And so I understood, okay, yeah, this is a way somebody can try to earn a living in a manner that's creative. And I didn't feel like I needed to go back to school because I was able to get the training that I needed, in other ways, community college or art centers. And so the first show that I submitted for, right, you have to get your photo, you have to make your work, you have to get your photographs, submit your photographs. was the American Craft Council wholesale show in Baltimore, which is like a big one. And like I had no idea what I had just accomplished by this being my first show, or how much work I now had to do to really make this happen. So it was a great learning curve, a great experience. I, did that, got there, took in enough wholesale orders that I was like, I think I'm going to have to quit my full-time job in order to fulfill these orders. And then I'm just going to figure it out from there. Just kept sending out applications, kept going to shows, and, it just kept me going. So, but I knew something was up. I knew it wasn't a perfect fit. And the reason why is like the second time I went back to, the second year of my wholesale shows, and I had the buyers come around again. They were like, I had come up with like whole new lines of different, work that was like different materials. And, I loved it, thought it was really cool. And they were scratching their heads and they're like, well, do you have anything that was like, kind of like what you did before, but like a little bit different? And I just realized, oh, that's what they want. And I just didn't think that was going to be a good, like I was really going to be able to do that year after year after year, kind of not being able to move in a different direction, or else, losing all of the business if I did move in another direction, or some of the business. Like, it's always like, I don't know. I just didn't have and the people that I saw who were successful, and sure enough, to this day, I have friends who, are doing it now 25 years later or more, and their work is great. Don't get me wrong. It's great work. It is essentially the same work though. And I just knew I didn't have the attention span for that. I needed to stimulate myself with new things more often.
Yeah, it would have got boring, right? You would have been pigeonholed yourself into this, like, this is what she does scenario, right?
That's what it would have been. I mean, I did do it for a number of years, but I just kind of couldn't see how to continue with the wholesale shows, like I just couldn't sort of see it. Yeah, I couldn't sort of see it. And I wanted to start to make things where I didn't have to make multiples. I mean, there's great satisfaction in looking at 20 of a thing that you've made, and they're all really nice and they're all really cool, and you're sending them off, and they're, people are liking them and they're getting sold and whatever, I mean, that's great to be able to make multiples, but it was getting boring, and I had people helping me. I knew I was like, there was only so much I could physically produce unless I continued to expand. And it's like, I didn't want to just sort of run a business that way. I wanted, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people who are designers who never even really make their work. They just design it and other people make it, and they have people working for them, and they're business managers and they're what have you. And I knew people like that, and they had great businesses. But I guess ultimately, I don't know. I wasn't really super satisfied. So I started trying to figure out other things.
That makes sense, because then it becomes, like you said, more of a business, and you're not really feeding that creative part of you, right? I mean, there's facets of it that still will, but it becomes like this, huge machine that you got to feed in order to keep it going, right?
It's true. I mean, there are fine artists who do run their studios, right, as businesses. They have managers, they have, people working for them, but they've managed to have like everything they do be one-offs, right? Everything they're doing is unique, and they have the freedom to, evolve kind of at will, it seems. I mean, obviously their galleries might push back. So there are people in fine arts who have managed that. I think it's just the nature of what jewelry is and what it needs to be. Like ultimately, like being on the body, has limitations, right? Something has to be made so well so engineered so well that it's not like something that you put on the wall, right? That no one is ever going to physically interact with it except to just put it up on the wall. It's like it has to be able to withstand falling on the floor or being stuck in a drawer. I mean, not every piece of jewelry is like that. And some things people know they need to take care of them. But ultimately jewelry became kind of my gateway drug into the art world. And from there, it's like I learned how to be a maker through jewelry. And I still think in terms of jewelry and I still make jewelry, but it's not the central thrust of what I'm doing at this particular moment. I do still do it though, if that makes sense.
It's still part of you. And so you're still, So it sounds like, like what Todd was saying, you need to feed this creative side of you. How did that progression from jewelry to fine art evolve?
Well, I think the jewelry started getting weirder and weirder and weirder, right? And what's weird to like your average consumer, there is kind of a whole subculture of art jewelry that is very free and very creative and not necessarily wearable. So the jewelry, I started to just really experiment with materials. I think it started, I had kind of a hiatus and I was going back to doing work and I really wanted to, still in the jewelry realm. And I really wanted to do something more voluminous. So I started, but because I was still thinking about jewelry, I didn't want it to be super heavy. So I thought, well, what about felting? And I came across in my research some amazing three-dimensional felted objects that were, found in, that were like thousands of years old that had been made in, other cultures. And I kind of saw, okay, this can be a three-dimensional form. How cool is that? So I started to make, larger work, this three-dimensional work. And then following along with that thinking, I don't exactly remember what it was, but I segued into cyanotypes on silk because I thought I would be able to combine it with the felt, but I never did. And instead, I just completely made a turn toward working with photographs that I'd taken and also objects to create cyanotypes, which is like a sensitizing either paper or fabric and putting a negative or an object on it and getting that, exposing it to the sun and then rinsing it in water to develop it. So I would take this silk and use it to make these very sculptural forms. Like I made these substructures that I adhered the silk to. And then I created these mixed media structures that I then completely coated in pink plastic. So this kind of became a series of work that was, I think that was the point, that was the point where I really started to move into the fine arts. This particular series was called Fluidity and Form and was, kind of in a manner of speaking, I was thinking about identity. And I happen to have, a child born female and a child born male. And I was just, thinking about their development, thinking about, identity along the realms of gender. So the pink and the blue were reflections of that. Towards the end of this series, I started to make work that was, bigger. The first thing was I made a cyanotype of the, the map of the Arctic Ocean, and I had a hot water bottle that I cut a hole out of so you could wear it if you wanted to, completely coated in pink with some sort of lace stitched around it and coming out of where the water would go into the water bottle. Coming out of it were these crystals. So this became this object that would, be on the wall. And working on that larger scale, I just started to think more and more about, I just segued from the interest in identity towards the environment. I mean, it couldn't really be helped. I lived in New Jersey. We had Hurricane Irene and then Hurricane Sandy less than a year apart from one another. I just experienced a lot of weather issues, just trying to get around and trees falling on my house or on the roads nearby, roads getting washed out. Just the reality of Sandy was really a life changing. I mean, I went to Staten Island with my good friend because her family lived there to go volunteer. And I went there because we weren't allowed to go to the Jersey Shore where we knew people who had property. We couldn't, it was closed off to anyone except homeowners to go clean up. So we went to Staten Island to volunteer to help. And 3 stories worth of debris was like, I just never seen anything like that before. A gas station that had completely collapsed into a giant sinkhole. Everywhere, people's garage doors had a brown watermark more than halfway up where the water had been. It was, it was a serious disaster, and I'd never been in a sort of a disaster zone like that before. And it definitely left a pretty huge imprint. So I think I was just thinking about that and processing that. And I think most of my work does tend to be a reflection of the things I'm processing, sort of consciously or, subconsciously. So that was when I started to make larger work and work that was focused more on the environment. But it really couldn't, it wouldn't have really happened. Like I wouldn't have just started making bigger work unless I'd had sort of a goal and a reason to do it. So I was working in an art center and where there was a curator who worked there. And I basically said, I went to an opening and I had on a piece of jewelry that had some construction materials in it and was sort of on the theme of the environment. She, admired the piece. I said, well, you should come to my studio. And she said, I'd love to. So she came to my studio, had a studio visit. And it was during the visit, she said, would you be interested in doing a show at the art center? And I said, just like I have done kind of all my life, just sort of jumped in and figured it out later. I said, yes, absolutely. So that was really the impetus that allowed me to focus my efforts to making larger scale work. That show was in 2014. It's called The Quick and the Deep. And it was at the New Jersey Center of Visual Arts, installation, sculpture and installation, and some video. So that was really the impetus that kind of gave me permission to work on a larger scale. I don't think I probably would have had the nerve to do it if I didn't have that external
push or that catalyst of somebody saying, hey, you want to have a show? And
yeah, I mean, really, it was pretty darn lucky, right? For her to offer this person who just made things that were basically small to say, have a whole, have this gallery, do something, do an installation in this gallery. I brought her maquettes and ideas and it was the best possible experience because she was like, okay, yeah. Because I was trying to get the date on the calendar to make it real. So we made it real. It was set, but she said, don't feel like you have to stick to this. So that was just so opposite of any other art experience I'd ever had, right? This is not the gallery saying, do you have something like you did last year, but a little bit different? Right. This is someone saying, feel free to follow where you're going. And that was a gift.
One of the pieces that from that exhibit that's interesting to me, just because it's so stark in contrast, is the shirts that are dunked in soil. And when I was paging through that exhibit, that one like really jumped out at me. So talk about that piece real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in Vermont at the Vermont Studio Center. I had a residency there, and I knew I was, the time I would spend there, I didn't have a lot of time because I had, smaller, my kids were still, around. And so I couldn't do a month. They did 2 weeks. And I knew I was working on this show there. And I brought materials, and I didn't know exactly, I had some ideas. The ideas I ended up going with are not the ideas I came away with, right? They really did change while I was there. And so when I was there, I went thrifting where some of my best ideas occur. And I found one of the shirts here is actually like a chef's jacket. And I got that chef's jacket, and I just thought, I don't know what I'm doing with this, but this is speaking to me. This is important. I'm going to bring this with me and figure it out. And, I just had this idea that I would see how it looked. And I got some soil, put it in a bucket, dipped it. And I saw, okay, yeah, this is the demarcation of that water line that I saw in Staten Island, right? The shirts are stand-ins for people, right? That's like a lot of the work that I do, even the sculpture and the installation, there is some kind of connection to the physical realm, like some relationship still to the body. So this, I think, is really representative of that line of a variety of sizes of shirts, of different, button-down shirts and V-neck female shirts or male shirts, whatever, if you want to gender a clothing. But, so yeah, that came from that. It wasn't something that I sketched out. It was just something that, it just kind of came from the subconscious. And then I put it on the wall, had this great wall outside of the gallery that was calling to be used.
And I like what you wrote on your website. The last paragraph, it says textiles, asphalt shingles, and insulation are used to invoke a narrative of environmental collapse. I thought that's a really powerful statement.
I think of materials metaphorically, right? Like That's why I'm not so interested in just shaping a lump of clay at this point, although I think that's, one of the highest art forms that you can possibly do is to shape a lump of clay into something. It's just not my particular calling. So yeah, I like to work with materials that have a connection, a history. People have, they have all of their own narratives that they bring to looking at that material, and then trying to use the material in a way that sort of disrupts people's narratives or helps them to maybe view a narrative and a new narrative from a different angle.
I love this installation. I love how the clothing symbolizes, like you said, the different genders, that they signify people without having people, right? And the fact that you have this water line that goes across them, like you saw when you were doing cleanup and volunteering, it's really powerful. I mean, it's amazing. I'm always amazed at how people's minds work. And this is one of those moments where I'm like, wow, that's brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that, for me, those moments are, they usually come in a way that's like not planned. It's like you do all the preparation, but the subconscious is churning and working hard over time. And then it just comes out when you're in that flow zone. So, that's always a goal, right? Is to get into that flow zone so that you're not imposing your ideas necessarily, but your ideas are getting filtered through your subconscious so that it comes out hopefully deeper. I guess I'm always, I'm always like thinking, oh gosh, is this really obvious? Was this didactic in some way? So hearing your feedback on that is really gratifying. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
The other thing that amazes me is that you were able to, obviously you have all these ideas flowing through you all the time, but you pivot from, where you're making, something on a smaller scale to something on a much larger scale, and how that little bit of time, in that little bit of time, you were able to just make that pivot. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I mean, I think I still feel a challenge to like get myself to work on a larger scale. Like, my default is to go small, go down to miniaturize. Right. And so I keep trying to remember to try to open it up or be willing to kind of open it up. It's a little bit, it's in some ways, it's still a little scary at times. If it's 3D, I feel less inhibited. 2D is still for me kind of the scary zone, where I feel like I'm challenging myself in ways that I'm not sure I'm not going to fail, but that's okay. That's how I keep it interesting for myself.
Talk, if you will, about this piece from the quick and the deep. I mean, this is a pretty heady endeavor in its scale as well.
This is a bundle here that could represent, the earth, or it could represent the bundles that people trudge in, trucks and cars when they are made to become refugees, if they're even able to take anything with them, right? So it definitely has that a tumbleweed kind of feel to it. It's a structure that is covered in domestic fabric. It has elements kind of projecting out of it. There's some acoustic tile, right? Normally on the kind of popcorn stuff on the ceiling. There's some astroturf. There's a piece of fence, metal fence, and there's some cyanotype. The cyanotypes for these are, I think, mostly I used photographs of tree bark and then made cyanotypes with those. There are also some isobar maps. So I had been researching, and I never really studied science in a very big way, but I came across isobar maps online, and when I was looking at storm stuff, and the isobar maps are fascinating, and I really thought that they're showing the high pressures and the low pressures and just the movement of it on a grid. Those visual things started to come into play in the work that I was making. So, but the cross section of a tree with its tree rings, like the tree that you see on the other side of that bundle that's supporting the piece of furniture, kind of represents that the flow of the high and low pressures on the isobar maps. They looks like cross sections of trees. It's just it's kind of uncanny how the microcosm and the macrocosm of the physical world. There are so many similarities, right? So this is a piece of furniture that is distressed, right? And it's kind of representing just that lack of control, the sort of loss of equilibrium that we experience with tremendous climate change generated storms. And then the objects that are suspended from the ceiling and passing through that, those are actually, I made those, they're made of plaster, tinted plaster. And, so they kind of read as cups, but sort of are reminiscent of bucket shapes and yet also sort of seem rain-like, and they cast these really cool shadows on the wall. So it was, I just kind of gave it a dynamic sense of movement that I wanted to kind of capture to capture that element of movement, of intensity of storms.
It's definitely arresting. For those people that don't know what an isobar map is, explain what an isobar map is.
So, I'll explain it in as far as I understand it. Like, there may be a better explanation out there, but essentially it's a map of the ones that I've found online that I've been drawn to. It's a map. So you'll see outlines of countries. You might see, names of oceans. It's a black on white drawing. And it is like on a grid-like structure. It almost seems like, those are latitude and longitude, although I'm not sure that they are necessarily, but there is that kind of grid structure as well imposed on the map. And then it shows the flowing lines of high pressure and low pressure. And depending on how close or far away the lines are, it indicates, whether there's, more or less, or if it's higher or lower pressure. And there are also other specific symbols that I do not know all of the meanings of, but I find them to be visually intriguing nonetheless. And I am drawn to them. So it's a visualization of, but it's kind of analog, right? Because now we just you can just look at these things and it's all multicolored and it's moving, it's digital, So the isobar map is kind of an older analog way of drawing out a moment in time of weather, and it'll show where storms are developing based on the high and low pressures. So there may be little bits of information like that are jotted down in there as well. It could say, absorbed or hurricane forming, or these other little bits of information on there. So, but it's definitely analog. Getting back to that analog versus digital.
And for somebody that has never seen one, think of a topographic map, but we're talking about pressure systems essentially.
Yes, exactly. And usually you're going to see bodies of water in there as well, because that's really influencing not always. It depends obviously on the weather event that you're looking at. But for Sandy, it was on the coast, so the ocean was involved.
Yeah.
And you've continued to use these isobar maps in your work, no matter what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I have been using them. I have continued to use them since 2013. I am starting to also, I guess I like data of various kinds. I like maps. I like topographical maps. I have been using floodplain maps of late. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of miss maps. I just get in the car, I punch in the take me to where is XYZ, Siri, and she gets me there. But I miss maps, and I was born without a sense of direction. So I really miss a good map. Sometimes you can just lay it out and see, in relationship to this place, that's where I'm going. And, that's near this, those kinds of discoveries of maps. I think there's a generation that will never hold a map, which is weird.
Yeah. I was just thinking the exact same thing. We've been spoiled. It is nice to be able to punch in an address and your phone talks to you, your GPS talks to you, but there's something about, and everybody that loves maps is like our generation or older, right? Like laying out a map and looking at a map. And, I have a whole bookcase full of topographic maps for hiking and
cool
city maps and that sort of thing. They just sit there on my shelf until I actually need it. And my kids will probably throw them all away once I'm dead, but
no,
I have them.
Hopefully at least I'll make art out of it.
When I moved to LA, I bought a map because you have to get around, right? And this is in 1980. And the map is about 2 inches thick. it's a book and it's about 2 inches thick, and it grids out the whole area of greater Los Angeles and Orange County. And I would just have that in my car, and like, that would be how I navigated. I can't even imagine doing that now, but.
Exactly. I know. It's, I don't know. There's something about being able to see that big picture, bigger than you can see on the screen of your phone. It's just, gives you a sense of perspective. What is the little diagram that tells, it shows north, south, east, west, and it tells you 1 inch to 1 mile.
I think it's called the legend. It has the roads.
Yes. Right. So like, that's something that most people today are never going to have to look at or think about, their
right.
whole kinds of, it's just.
They wouldn't even know what they're looking at.
No. I mean, look, I like to give people some credit. I'm sure they looked at maps in school and they're in textbooks, but again, even textbooks are a thing of the past. So yeah, who knows?
I don't think that's a thing that's even taught anymore, even on the basic level in schools. I really don't.
It's changed so quickly because, just 10 years ago, I have a kid who had to draw maps in school, and so that was just 10 years ago. I'm sure they're not doing that anymore.
No,
I bet you're right. You have this first show,
yeah,
and you do these incredible installations. And so where does it evolve from there then? Like what is that next step?
The next step is, gosh, it's so much easier to store jewelry than this big stuff. What was I thinking? I continued to make work that kind of continued that, like that, the large sort of tumbleweed globe thing in The Quick and the Deep. It's sort of a patchwork, quilted around the form. So I continued this idea of quilting domestic textiles around objects, and made a series of objects. One was called Shelter for the New Disasters, Plant for the New Disasters, Vessel for the New Disasters. The idea for me was kind of projecting into an idea of a future person it would have to be a very dystopic time where, nature essentially obliterated, kind of making things, because humans, I believe, will always make things, even if they don't know why. I think they always will feel a need to make things. So the idea was like making things that resemble a collective memory of what nature was. So very odd forms made from various recycled cardboard or wood. And all of these objects were then completely covered with hand-stitched domestic textile, kind of quilted around them. So, I made a number of these things. Some of them were in a couple of different shows in New Jersey. And that was kind of the next grouping of work that I did after The Quick and the Deep. But I kind of toggle back and forth because, jewelry people kind of in that small little world of art jewelry, some people know who I am. So sometimes I get asked to do things or people kind of know my work. But after 2014, which was The Quick and the Deep, and I made these other pieces that were in some other shows, I started to contend with my mother's very serious illness. And I started, helping her with that, with her health issues. And I had to take on a full-time day job because I had kids in college. So my time really contracted, time that I could spend in the studio. And I was feeling kind of, I guess, there are fallow times like maybe in between projects, but this was worse than just a fallow time. Because a fallow time, my philosophy is like, okay, well, it's a fallow period. So what I need to do is nurture the soil, put a lot of things in, put in nutrients and look at things, read things, do research, and let stuff start to gestate in order to bring out something new. But this was like beyond fallow. I was just feeling like so completely depleted. I couldn't even kind of move forward. So I was in San Francisco again, even though I had been living in New Jersey, because I was there for work, for a job I ended up doing for 6 years. The company was based out there. And as it happens, there was a seminal gallery there from the art jewelry world. It's called Velvet Da Vinci, run by Mike Holmes. It had been around for 25 years. So I had always known about it. I'd had some work in it over the years, but I just went in there on my business trip. I was like, what the hell? Maybe I'll get some inspiration, just see what's out there. And I went there, and it's a beautiful gallery space, and there was great work. But next to the gallery is a garage, and in the garage is a large steel elevator, because it used to be a furniture manufacturing building from the 1920s. And in this structure, he had an exhibition. It's like he instead of using the elevator to go up to his second floor, he used some other stairs. So it was parked on the first floor, and someone had done an installation. And I saw that, and I just said, hey, hey, Mike, can I do that? I have some ideas I think you might really like that would just be great in that space. Wasn't sure I had exactly the ideas, but I knew I could do it. So he's like, well, yeah, why don't you, let's talk about it. So that kind of got me going. When I did the quick and the deep, I had these objects on the wall that were made out of a blue insulation. They were sort of conical shaped, and they caught the light in a great way. And when the light catches them and you look through them, it's this amazing blue that I haven't been to see glaciers, but in the photographs that I see, to me, it resembles the blue of, glacial ice. So and when you look through them, you would see, isobar. I had isobar maps in them. And then in one of them, I had a video that I made, which I can maybe talk about later if you want me to. But so I had this material that was very cool. And I just thought, I want to make a giant ones of these and hang them in this elevator shaft. And so it was just kind of fortuitous. To have that opportunity gave me the impetus then to do a bunch of research. And in that research, I came across a woman I'd never heard of who grew up across the Golden Gate Bridge in San Rafael, California, which is not far from San Francisco at all. And as a matter of fact, the owner of this gallery, that's where he was from. So there was a woman who lived, and in the 1930s, she came from a wealthy family. She became an Arctic explorer in her later, in her midlife. And her name was Louise Arner Boyd. And she did some fascinating expeditions where, she was the person who organized these expeditions, and she contracted scientists to do specific research. I mean, she had a very methodical approach, and she published her findings in 1938, I believe, through the American Geological Society. So I was just completely fascinated. She took hundreds of these beautiful photographs. Really, I'm not exactly sure. I thought the story was that she got a camera from Ansel Adams, but that may not be quite right. It could be that she definitely knew Ansel Adams because I've seen photographs he's taken of her house, but maybe she just got advice from him on what kind of camera to get. So anyway, she had the top of the line, the most modern equipment for that time. And she was able to capture tremendous topographical details of the glaciers and just everything. So I was fascinated by the idea of her taking these black and white photographs, and yet, right, because that was all technology could offer at the time. But really, she was standing in front of something that had this amazing color, this incredible blue color. So that just sort of struck me. And plus the fact that these photographs are from the 30s, and a lot of them are showing scenes that you're not going to see anymore, because many of these glaciers have changed significantly since that time. So I was just very interested in the combination of, the passage of time, the change in technology, her lived experience of, seeing this incredible Arctic ice, but only being able to capture it in black and white. So I used her photographs in the installation itself on the walls of the steel elevator, and then made these pieces that captured that blue quality of the ice and the other textures that you see on the surfaces, and just the, trying to capture the mix of the sticks and the debris and the things that get stuck in the ice. And so I was able to combine jewelry with installation in this exhibit, which was called Cryosphere So Blue. Cryosphere means, it has to do with the ice, on the earth, the realm of ice. And I also just like the way it sounds, because like Crimea River, it's like cryosphere has the word itself is a beautiful word. And I really love that word. So yeah, so those pieces were made with tinted blue plaster, and I incorporated coal. That's what's created a lot of our climate problem. So I like to use the coal in there.
New Magazine is our media sponsor for the Tenet podcast. That's NUE. You can follow both the national and the Denver edition of New Magazine on Instagram. The national edition can be found at new_magazine, and the Denver edition at new_Denver_magazine. Look to New for compelling stories from the world of art and fashion. Thanks for listening.
This is Thea Clark, and you're listening to the Tenet podcast.
I love how there's this thread that runs through your whole story. It's not just like these different facets of work, but from the very beginning up to this point that you're telling us about this, and how you incorporate these elements that, have to do with the environment and are very pertinent to what's going on right now, and climate change and what you've already experienced. And obviously, I imagine, being a mother also plays in that, and thinking, oh my God, what's happening with our planet, and what are my kids going to have to experience in their lifetime, through all this, and making these beautiful objects at the same time. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that to me.
I think that there's a narrative approach to the work. So for me, I kind of see that tendency to look at the world through a narrative lens that, from my experience in theater and just the way my brain works, I guess, trying to piece together a story that people can connect to, even though the work is essentially abstract, that the materials themselves can be connected to through, they can be seen as metaphorically, but also people have a genuine, can have an actual connection to a lot of the materials that I use. In this case, the coal, or, and another of the pieces in that was rope that was used, So I try to use objects that it's not just for I'm not saying, oh, this is a cool thing. I want to use this cool thing because it's cool. I have collections of things. I might have one thing that I've held on to for 20 years, but it hasn't found a place in my work because it doesn't speak to the content yet. And it may never. But sometimes I'll find something, I'm like, that is why I've had you for so long, because you're exactly the right thing to tell this story at this time. So that's always fun when that happens. I just sold that piece. I was just going to
ask if you would talk a little bit about it. It's called Head of Joseph Franz Fjord.
Yes, or Head of Franz Joseph Fjord, depending on the map that you read. It's so this is the map, the area that Louise Arner Boyd went to was Greenland, and she was primarily focused on the eastern side of Greenland and mapping this area. She also used sonograms and used that to get detailed analysis of the depths of the water off in the fjords. And interestingly enough, the government during World War II came to her for her expertise to help with that because I guess they had an interest because of submarines in the area, right? So this is a piece that it captures. It's made with tinted blue plaster, which is kind of absorbed resin to make it harder. And it has a lot of knotted hemp, which is kind of forming this lower structure, very textural, responding to the photographs of the textures of the surface of the glaciers and even the land, when there is no ice, just very the debris that's left when the ice recedes. And then this particular, it has a plastic coated kind of spiral form that's also part of the piece. That was something that I had made a couple of years ago. One of these things that I didn't know what I was ever going to do with it, but it found its home in this piece. And to my eye, it kind of captures a couple of things. It's sort of a grid-like structure that references the maps that she made, but it also has a very nautical feeling to me. It speaks to me of the ropes and the structures on the ship that she was on, doing these expeditions from the ship and, in the ice pack. And so just trying to capture those elements all together.
And the rings that are in there?
So there's a combination of things in there. So there are rings, and specifically I use them because I could get that great color on them with a patina. But really they're simply kind of representative of the what gets stuck in the ice, just the bits and pieces of organic matter that you see, apparently that people see that's stuck in the ice. And then there are, on the other side of it is a very specific kind of stone. It's called a rutilated quartz. It's mostly clear, but it has these little black elements that go through it. So to me, it really is sort of like looking at ice with something suspended in it. So those are kind of the primary elements of this piece. The woman who purchased it is an author of a biography of Louise Arner Boyd. And she's apparently planning a trip this summer to Greenland. And I'm keeping my fingers crossed that because I believe her plan is that she's going to take this and take a photograph of it, in Greenland. I don't know. I won't know until I see it, but I kind of can't wait to see what she comes up with.
And had she seen this whole installation that you did?
Yeah, she actually reached out to me. This was before her book was published. I guess she was still doing research, and she came across my show online, Cryosphere So Blue, that had been in San Francisco at the Velvet Da Vinci Gallery. And she reached out to me about it at that time. And so we had some correspondence, and then kind of ended. And then she reached out to me recently because she's writing another book about different women explorers. One chapter will be on Louise Arner Boyd. So she's revisiting Louise Arner Boyd, and she wants to include a couple of images of my work in her publication. And that's when she also, decided that she wanted to own one of the pieces. So that was very cool.
That is cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. You continue to make jewelry. You do commissions, I assume, as well? Or is that kind of not a thing anymore?
I have done commission, but I really, I don't anymore. Yeah, I just don't.
And because you're making it for yourself, it's much more of a gratifying thing, I would imagine. And if somebody wants to purchase it, like this woman that just purchased this piece, you're open to that then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying I would never do a commission, but it has to be like if someone wants to get a wedding band made, I'm not your person. I could do it, but it's not my thing. Go to someone who does that full time, and you'll you'll have a great experience, right? So you have to have seen it and liked it, and for some reason you are interested in it. And if someone had an object that they wanted to have incorporated into a piece of jewelry, like something that had special meaning to them, I would be open to something like that. Like, where there was some collaboration, but I was essentially able to kind of approach it and with a lot of my own ideas. So it would have to be, I haven't solicited commissions. I have had them, a couple of them over the years.
I have a real appreciation for this, this art jewelry that you make. It's, very abstract, very conceptual. I think when you initially see it, you don't know, how to take it, but then you start reading about it or you hear stories like you've been telling us, and it takes on a whole different meaning, right? Like a lot of art sometimes when it's abstract or very conceptual, once you hear about it, it really does grab you. Some of these pieces, how do you go about pricing them?
That's a good question. I look at my labor, and I do usually think about it in terms of what would it have to sell for in a gallery? Because I don't want to, because I do work with galleries, I am not currently with a gallery because Velvet Da Vinci closed, and I haven't been seeking out a gallery as of late for jewelry. But I do have this sort of, ethic of I should not undercut the gallery, right? So I think about what I would need to get for a piece, like how can I explain it? So if I know the gallery is generally going to sell it for at least twice the amount of the wholesale price, I have to think, what's that final price going to be? And I look at other people's work who I understand the labor involved. I understand the conceptual elements involved. And I try to look at other prices online and get a sense for what other things are going for, because some of the material, not all of the materials are fine materials, but what is a painting, right? It's canvas and pigment on, and that's all. So how do you price a painting? Some people do it by the square foot. Obviously, I'm not going to do that with jewelry. So it has to do with the labor and kind of the perceived value for compared to other work that I've sold through galleries. So I kind of use my own work and what it's sold for in the past, use the inflation calculator for what's that today in today's dollars. And, do I think that's realistic, or does it feel too low, or does it feel too high? And I try to kind of do a gut check on it. So it's not very scientific, as you can hear.
it's not scientific, but I mean, we hear this a lot from artists, and I think you go about it in a smart way. You're thinking about, how it relates to what other things that you see out there in similar galleries or what have you, and then the time spent, right?
Right.
And I think that's a good way of doing it. I mean, how else would you go about it? And I want to talk about this piece real quick here. Talk about this piece. What is the name of this piece?
Memonero, which is Latin for to remember. It's a piece that's made up of two found shell elements. It's made up of a piece of anthracite coal, and it has a yellow element, which is actually a piece of pine rosin. So pine rosin, if anyone who's ever been in a ballet studio will probably remember that there's usually, or there was when I was younger, a box of pine rosin. You'd go and stomp on it and get it on your shoes to just so that you wouldn't slip around on the floor. Has a really distinctive smell, but it's a beautiful, it can be large, translucent yellow. It's made from the sap of a pine tree. And I've coated both of those elements in epoxy resin to just make them a little less fragile. So through the pine rosin it's essentially a poem that I found. It doesn't really matter the source of it, but the word remember can be seen if you hold it in your hand and look through the rosin, you'll see that word. It doesn't jump out at you when you're wearing it, but like a lot of things to do with jewelry, sometimes a jeweler may put something on the back of a piece of jewelry that sort of something for the person who's interacting with it to discover or to kind of have as a private message to the person who's interacting with the jewelry. It's not something that's part of the presentation when it's worn. This similarly, I didn't want it to jump out at you, but you have to really kind of look through it, look more deeply into it, and then you would see this word. These elements are all interconnected with knotted waxed hemp, which is a very repetitive, time-consuming way of doing anything. And I think I am interested in work that sort of is built from accumulation, and there's something kind of organic about it. And it also speaks to, it's very, as I said, it's very laborious. So Memonero is those knots that I use in some of these jewelry pieces that are speaking about the environment. To me, these knots are representative of like the individual actions, the accumulation of individual actions that have gotten us to where we are right now. It's so many, right? It also speaks to the many actions that we will need to take to get through our current crisis. So it's a metaphor of intense labor. So that's what that is. So this was a piece that was initially made for a show called Sight Effects. It was curated by an artist in the United States and an artist in Germany, I believe. And so they selected like a group of artists from the US and a group of artists from Europe. You would make one piece and then you would send your inspiration, something to do with your inspiration, and someone would get that. And then they would make a different piece in response to someone's inspiration. And the idea of the exhibit was to see whether or not people could tell an American maker's work versus a European maker's work, or whether or not, the globalization of the internet has made those distinctions irrelevant.
That's a really interesting concept for an exhibition.
Yeah, unfortunately I didn't get to see it because of COVID. It was in Munich, first in Munich, and then it was supposed to go to Philadelphia. That got canceled because of COVID. And then it did have an exhibit, but again, you couldn't really see. It was in Baltimore. I couldn't actually go and see it. But I would have liked to have seen it. There's a nice catalog, and the work is, I don't know if people can tell the difference. I mean, I think, traditionally people say American jewelry tends to be very narrative based, and European jewelry tends to be more conceptual and abstract and minimal. So I don't know if that played out ultimately, but that was kind of the point, was to compare and contrast and to see if people could guess where something was made.
It's interesting that there's that thought. And I heard you speak about this on either your artist talk or some other interview that you did, that, the American art jewelry has more of a narrative than the European.
It does. I mean, I don't know if that's a result of the people who were sort of became foundational in the American jewelry movement post World War II, right? So GIs came back. They were able to go to school on the GI Bill, and a lot of these people, some of them went to school for jewelry making, go figure. And so some of these people in the Pacific Northwest, other places, they became sort of some of the earliest makers of jewelry. I mean, the art jewelry world in this country, you can really look at it and it's like, you see stuff from the 50s and you see stuff from the 40s, but the 60s, it has I think probably a more recent history overall. Who's got a really nice collection is the Museum of Art and Design in New York City. It's one of the, kind of just gives you a kind of a sense of the chronological development of the form. So if you're ever in New York City, it's a fun place to go, because they have a purpose. They have showcases that were built specifically to display jewelry, but then they also have drawers that you can pull out and see their collection. So even though it's not on display, you have access to it, which is really great.
Do you still have this piece?
I do.
And, if you don't know anything about jewelry making or what went into this particular thing, people would have no idea. How many hours, if I can ask, do you think you have into this piece?
Okay.
Because it looks intense, and on all the process that went into putting it together.
Yeah, honestly, I honestly don't know, but 40, maybe more. This one was kind of a bear. It looks so simple.
Right.
A lot of my work, I feel like sometimes when I'm making them, like I'm wrestling with monsters, it's like there's so much going on just in engineering it to keep the whole thing together. But the idea behind this was to make it look like you couldn't even see how it was being held together. It was just all of these elements are right next to each other, but the connections are not prominent, right? So that took a lot of a lot of things on the back. So if you were to see the back side, you get it. It doesn't, you could get a sense of how many structural elements are in place there internally holding things together, in addition to what you can see from the front.
How big is this piece?
I think that one is, I don't have my sheet here, but I think that's about 4 inches, maybe about 4 inches by about 1.5 inches wide by maybe 1.5 inches tall at its highest, or maybe 1 3/4 inches tall, maybe 4.5 inches.
And this is a brooch. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And this was also just part of an exhibition that you had recently that ended in March, correct?
Yes.
Part of it was called Do Undo.
Yes, Do Undo. That was at the Hunterdon Art Museum, which is located in Clinton, New Jersey. it's a beautiful historic mill on a river, and it has been a museum. I'm embarrassed to say I've forgotten how long. I think since the 1960s, but it could be a little bit longer. So what they did was they had 3 solo exhibits that kind of opened concurrently. They have a gallery on the first floor. They have a large space on the second floor. And then on the second floor is an addition that was put on, 2-story addition. And there's a gallery that has windows on all 3 sides called the River Gallery, because you can have beautiful views of the river from that gallery. And that was the space that I had the exhibition in. So it's like great old wood floors and huge beams everywhere. It's a marvelous structure. So yeah, that was one of I made new work for that show, and I had an installation piece that was also made for the show, and which was a piece on the floor called Necklace for a Tree. And that one, the necklace for the tree, kind of harkens back to that installation of the line of the shirts, in that I used soil to dye the fabric. It's essentially one bed sheet that's cut and sewn and knotted, and then laid, in this case, in a circle, starting from the inside to the outside. And you see the color of the slip of the soil that's staining the fabric is darkest at the outer rings, fading as it goes towards the center until it's entirely white. Yeah. And so what was fun was I made like a performative video out of the installation process. So when I got there to do the install in January, we filmed, my installing the piece, and then that was available on an iPad in the gallery for people to see. So that performative video I referred to as "The Crone Bequeaths Her Riches to the World." I had a costume, and it was kind of my bringing back the other elements of my life where I was doing something performative. There was movement involved, and it was recorded for prosperity. So
it's fun to watch. It's interesting. And is this the first time that you've ever done a performative piece around, one of these a sculpture or anything that you've made?
Yeah. It is. I enjoyed it. I had a little soundtrack.
Yeah. So that's like ambient noise.
Yep.
At first you think this building must have a lot of street noise. And then I'm like, no, this is ambient noise or sounds that were recorded and then, overlaid with the video. And exactly. I liked it. I really did enjoy that.
Thanks. When I after creating the piece and putting it down, it was such a meditative process that I just thought, I can't really ask someone else to do this for me. It's like, I want to do it again. It's like walking a labyrinth or something, Yeah, that was what inspired me to make it into a whole thing.
It's great. And we're not going to spoil anything. So I'll definitely post a link to the video so that people can watch it. But I want to ask you, what is the significance of the knots that are tied in this material in the bed sheet?
So, to me, this piece kind of pulls together a lot of common threads in some of my work. No pun intended there. Domestic fabric, the influence of the environment on, the nature on that man-made realm, of the domestic environment that the sheet itself represents. So the knots, I don't really know that I can speak to them specifically. I mean, again, it was incredibly, it would have made an interesting video in and of itself. I mean, this is over 200 feet of sheet, this piece. It's like 220 feet, I think, long. And trying to create knots was it was a challenge to kind of figure that out. It seems like it would be simple to do, but every time you create the open loop, you have to pass through all of that material. So, you have to kind of devise a method, but keeping all of that material kind of in, or I don't know, I'm not describing it very well, but it was extremely physical and more laborious than I thought. I think making the knots, just doing the knots took me, I think, like 4 hours just to put all of the knots in.
I'm surprised that you got it done that fast, because that would be laborious. And I mean, so you took this is a single bed sheet that you tore or cut.
So it was cut on the bias. So it's cut so that it stays one piece,
right?
Primarily one piece the whole way. I think, yeah. And then a friend of mine who's better with the sewing machine, closed it. And then, and I took it from there. I made some slip with some soil. I have great soil now that I live in North Carolina. It's got so much iron oxide in it. It's this beautiful, red clay soil. So it makes an excellent slip for dyeing fabric. I'm definitely going to be making more pieces using bed sheets and slip. They'll probably be pieces that are going to ultimately be on the wall, a larger scale. But that's kind of what some of the things I'm going to be working on next in a residency I'm going to be doing later in the year.
So was this process cathartic for you, or was it just laborious?
It was which process? The laying it in the circle or making the knot?
I think the whole thing, because each piece of it is in itself very, very like a difficult task. It's not something that's easily done.
Well, but it's to look at it, you wouldn't. I don't know if when you looked at this piece, did you really think, how did she make all those knots? Did that really seem like?
No, but when
exactly. Right.
Right. So you're not thinking about like, oh, these are all like knots that are spaced apart. And then you got, you're not really thinking of the process. I never even got that deep into it, as far as I'm just really taken by, and I kind of want to come back to that question, but I'm taken by how I love how it's white on the inside and tan, gets darker and tan on the outside.
The different tones. Yeah.
It reminds me of the rings of a tree,
Exactly.
but so here comes this, so you have to, like you said, you gotta cut this fabric from one sheet, and then, you had somebody else sew it, and then you're tying these knots that, when it's that long, you gotta pull all that fabric through, and they look fairly evenly spaced. I don't know.
No, they're definitely not evenly spaced intentionally. And I think, to answer your question of was it laborious or not, actually, to me, this kind of work feels so free
mm-hmm.
and loose and improvisational in a way that I cannot. It's very hard to be with jewelry, because jewelry has to be, because it has mechanisms and it has to, it's so small. It's like a very tight way of working. Mm-hmm. So this is I find it very freeing to work like this. And, I love the fact that it has a minimalist overall, visual appearance that belies the kind of labor that was involved in the making of it.
Meditative?
Sometimes it was meditative. I'll be honest with you, making those knots, sometimes I just was like, oh my word, I do not know if I'm going to be able to get through 220 something feet of this. What was I thinking? I bit off more than I could chew here. So I was a little bit overwhelmed at times, but I just would take breaks and then come back to it. It took me longer than I thought it was going to take. I loved doing the dyeing. I loved like making the slip out of the soil, letting that dry. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I didn't realize it was going to be quite as laborious as it ended up being. I would do it again, having said that, but now I know what I'm in for.
Well, I think especially the view that I'm seeing now that Todd's showing an overhead shot of it, I love it. I think there's something really cool about it. It's mesmerizing just to stare at it.
I agree, Wes. Like I was sitting here as you guys are talking, you're asking your question and Thea's answering it. And I was just like, there's a peacefulness that kind of washes over me when I'm looking at it. And I don't know, it really is exquisite. And for something that, again, you kind of look at it and look at how simple it is, but there's so much complexity at the same time. I just love it. And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to make a point though. So when it's on the floor, you know what I want to do? I want to sit in the middle of it. And I want to sit.
It's funny that you should say that, because in the gallery, unfortunately, they believe that people were probably going to do that. So they put up little paper signs around it that says, please do not step on the art.
Oh, bummer.
I want to sit in it because I feel like you would get some kind of power from it. Like if you sat in there, meditated, like it would have some kind of resonance with you.
I like that. I might have to incorporate that into the performance the next time I do that.
So I'm going to ask you, how much for this piece if you were to sell it?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I have no idea. I've never sold an installation piece, so I'd have to really.
I've never wanted to buy an installation piece till this one.
Well, thanks. I mean, the thing is, it's like, I look at it and I'm like, well, would it have the same impact if it was on the wall? Like, can I just pin it to, some kind of background so it goes up on the wall? It's like, yeah, you could do that. I could do that. Maybe I would do that. But it's over 4 feet, it's like 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet. I don't know. I haven't, some of the other works that I'm planning definitely are going to go onto the wall. I think it's just a matter of putting, making a decision of, I want this to be something that doesn't have to be recreated every time. And I want it, to live on the wall. And then I could adhere it to something so that it's done and it's not a process piece anymore. But I'm not sure that I will be doing that. I might. It's a possibility.
So then my next question kind of goes back with what you were saying, is like, what was in your mind? What brought this piece? Just because it's simple, and it's, when you're looking at it, you think it's simple, but it's multifaceted for sure. So what were you thinking? Oh, go ahead, Todd.
And to follow up with Wes's question, this is very different than everything else that's going on for this exhibition, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. This is, as was the conical shapes hanging in the elevator shaft was different from the jewelry elements in the last solo show that I did, The Cryosphere is So Blue. So, I did know the space, and I knew that I wanted to have this central piece. I knew that, the other things they wanted was the jewelry. So any other installation was going to have to not interfere with the walls of the space. So, this was the fact that this was a piece for the floor made sense for the space. So I didn't necessarily say, I'm going to make an installation piece for this gallery. What should it be? It should be this. A lot of my work comes from kind of an improvisational interacting with materials when I'm in the studio. So I have worked with clothing a lot and other domestic textiles. So I sometimes have like remnants of that laying around, and I've used other pieces of, all of the other fabric pieces that I was doing were primarily white fabric. So I had a element from a shirt that had buttons on it. And And actually, I just had a piece of white fabric. I don't even know maybe it was like a hem of pants or something that I'd taken off a pair of white pants, and it was just sort of laying around. And I knotted it and I looked at it, and then it was short, and then I just put it down on the floor. It was really like improvisational with the materials, like a dialogue. If you've ever done improvisation, you don't have a plan, right? You don't, whether it's a physical contact improv or whether it's acting improv, not necessarily like comedy, well, even comedy improv, you don't know where it's going to go. So I'm just letting that interaction happen. So it was literally just picking up a piece of fabric, playing with it, and then just thinking, I've knotted it, and then setting it down. What if this was a lot longer? What if this went, what if this just kept going? Then what would that look like?
I love that. I love the improvisational piece of it. I think that's so cool. I'm fascinated by, especially, when you see painters or sculptors, you can kind of figure out just by looking at it a lot of times, like, oh, I can see where they're coming from. But when it comes to installation art and performance art, sometimes you're looking at it and you're like, I don't get it. And then, so to hear explain like how this came about is really interesting, but it doesn't detract from, like, I find it mesmerizing. And when it's on the floor, I want to sit in it. I mean, but at the same time, it's just, sometimes there's a disconnect, right? For the average viewer, especially for somebody like me, installation art sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my head around.
I saw a really great group of installations all together at the Renwick Gallery in DC. And, some of it is, I'm trying to remember the artist's first name. Eichler, I think is her last name. And she uses netting and suspends netting. And actually there's one of her pieces here in Greensboro in a local park. It's really beautiful. So there are large steel supports in an outdoor installation that there's different netting of different colors and hanging at different, creating different amounts of drape, right, and different levels. It's just so simple and so beautiful. And it's just, I don't know, that informs the space and it makes you feel a certain way when you're in it. The fact that this particular piece makes you want to interact with it, to me, that makes it a success, right? I just find that to be, that's terrific. I love that a lot more than just kind of scratching your head. But for me, when I come across like something that takes over the space, and either it may take over the space and yet it still draws me in. So some work is like that for me. It's like you just kind of get this overall, it kind of hits you, how it's impacting the space, especially large installations. But then, the ones that I'm drawn to are the ones that not only is there an overall impact, but it pulls you in and you want to hone in and really kind of look at it in a closer way and absorb it on another level as well. It's like close up and panoramic view.
I can't get over how much I love this piece. I'm serious. I mean, we will look at art all the time, and I don't keep a running list of like, my favorite art, but if I did, this would definitely be on it and probably at the top of the list, because I don't know, it's arresting. I would love to see, they didn't have the little notes saying, hey, you need to not touch, or I would love to have a video of what people would do when they walked in the room. Because if you look at the other picture and the do undo, if I walked into this room, it would definitely, I'm not even there and it stops me and I'd be like, whoa, what has gone on here? And then I'd want to walk around it. And then I start taking it in. And then I look at that other, the more detailed photo looking down on it. And it's meditative and it has a lot of meaning for me, and maybe it's the stage of life that I'm in with thinking about the environment, because climate change is a big thing that weighs heavily on my mind all the time. I love trees. I love the knots in there, because to me, it's marking time, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me personally.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you see the performance video, I don't know if I should say anything about it, but there's like a ticking that goes on during the video, almost
Mm-hmm.
like it's marking time, like a clock.
Right.
And it's enthralling to me. And then, I mean, it's so different from the rest of what's going on. It's like, hey, it makes me stop, and then it makes me want to slow down, because in this day and age where we're just like go, go, go all the time. And even in, I've seen it in galleries all the time. I see it in museums where people are just, they're doing the drive-by. This piece like hits you and makes you stop, and then kind of it slows you down. It kind of gets you in this mindset, I imagine. And then you want to stop and you want to slowly look at all the different pieces that are these jewelry pieces that are hanging on the wall. And I really want to start taking them in. I want you to talk about how this do undo exhibition came about and the rest of what you see or would have seen in it. But you can see the pictures on Thea's website.
Yeah, and I think they're also on the museum's website as well. So basically, one of the members of the curatorial exhibition staff of the museum reached out to me through my website, and I kind of pondered, like, should I ask them how they came across me, why they chose, and then I decided, no, I want it to be a mystery to me. I don't really want to know. I mean, the fact is, like, I'm on a list. I won a fellowship through the New Jersey State Arts Council in 2012. So if they were looking for artists and they were looking through a list like that, my name would have come up there. There are other people other curators in New Jersey, maybe I don't think they would have asked somebody, but maybe somebody, recommended me. They like to put, I don't know how. So basically she reached out to me and asked if I had work available, and I had new work. And I said, well, I hadn't actually made any jewelry since 2019 because I moved in the middle of the pandemic. So, but I just threw it right out there and said, yeah, I have like 4 or 5 pieces that are almost done, which is like basically true. I had a collection of ideas, kind of like elements juxtaposed next to each other, on a table in my studio. I just hadn't done the work to connect them all together, finalize them. So I knew I could do it. It was pretty fast. I think she reached out to me in September and, needed everything completed by, oh golly, it's all a blur now, like by November 1st, I think it was. So that was kind of a quick turnaround time, but there's nothing like a good deadline to get you going, even if you have to pull 60-hour weeks. So really it kind of came out of the blue and it was unexpected. And, I'm always so grateful when I get opportunities like that, because they really do feel just like gifts, I work best when I'm hyper-focused, and a deadline, especially one with those kind of time constraints, certainly gave me lots of hyper-focus, reasons to hyper-focus. So that was good. I think, I'd just been in New Jersey long enough that if they were trying to find something different, an artist whose names are, available as being around, that's probably how they came across my name.
And so what else did you have on display here as far as?
So ultimately this became a kind of a decade of work from 2012 to 2022, decade of work that is focused on the environment. So there was an assortment of pieces that I kind of refer to as like red weather, sort of these pieces of alarm that I created in 2012 and 2013. So these pieces show a variety of techniques that have fed into the sculpture. You can really see like dialogues that have gone on that are consistent. They just manifest in different forms. So, you'll see the grid-like structure of the isobar maps, which I had begun looking at and started to use. In that piece, there's a piece that uses them first on the back, and then I start using them on the front. I would print them onto fabric and then cover elements of wood or metal with them, and then use those in the structures. I also used trees in kind of ominous ways. I love trees too, but with climate change and aging tree canopies when you're living next to old trees, they become scary, as well as they're essential, and we need to plant more of them. But when they die, they can take some of us along with them. So they're kind of ominous, capturing elements of isobar maps and just sort of, again, trying to that dynamic of action of the storms. Some of the pieces sort of have three-dimensional elements that to me are almost reminiscent of comic book graphics, where like pow and bang, just kind of these exploding scenarios that I try to kind of capture that dynamic in a three-dimensional form. And so these red pieces, kind of red of alarm, that's sort of the earlier works. And then some of the works that other earlier work that used the acoustic tile, which was became a material that I incorporated into the sculptures. So there was a grouping, I would say, I don't remember offhand how many, 5 were from, earlier 2012, 2013, and then a couple of them were from 2019, and then 4 of them were new works that were made for the show. And those works incorporated shells and anthracite coal and the knotting and other domestic fibers. There's one piece that I like a lot that's a little bit different from the others, called Unseasonable, Summer in Winter. And it's made with a repurposed lamb's wool earmuff. So it's got a very soft and fluffy border, and then the back. So it's like really tactile. You really want to kind of caress it and cuddle it when you're wearing it. It's very comfortable when you're wearing it. And then on the surface of, laid on top of this fluffy lamb's wool earmuff is a thin print cotton that I created, sort of an upholstered kind of element. So it's got, it's sort of raised and has some filling in it. And then that is encircled by a vintage coral beads from a vintage coral necklace. So, one of the things, it's like, I have issues with the materials that traditionally go into jewelry. Like, I don't want to use mined materials, and I don't want to use, I just don't, if I could make work without metal, I would, but sometimes I just need to hold things together. So I use a minimal amount of metal for the most part. Don't get me wrong. Metal is a wonderful medium, and it can be very expressive and creative. And I do love working with it, but I just ethically, the deeper we get into climate crisis, like the more I have trouble with the idea of using something that's been mined out of the ground and contributing in so many ways. So So I know with metal, a lot of it is recycled. You can specifically purchase recycled, but that's why you see a lot of these other elements in my work, whether it's reused fabrics, repurposed objects. I would never buy new coral. This is an old coral necklace that, is from years and years ago. So yeah, that's kind of brings me back to that statement before. I think, making things from clay is like one of the greatest things you can do as an artist, because it's just the earth, and you can even fire it with, you don't even have to use electricity necessarily to fire it, right? Certainly people didn't thousands of years ago. So I aspire to have as small a footprint as possible that, is contributing in any way to the climate crisis. I'm doing what I can.
I was going to save this for the end of the interview, but I'm going to ask it right now. Are you optimistic about the future when it comes to the environment and human interaction?
So it's funny you should say that, because I have, recently thought of, like starting to challenge myself, like, is there some way I can have a less of a dystopic viewpoint and try to make work that's, maybe futuristic in a positive way? So I'm asking myself that. I just feel we're on such a precipice right now. Like it could just go either way. I don't know that we're going to rise to the occasion. I just think that greed may win out. I don't want it to. I would say I'm uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to feel optimistic, but I am not there yet.
Yeah. I mean, I look at old photographs of the industrial age and I think, man, we've come a long way. I look at the forest, even I live in South Dakota right up against the Black Hills. And, the photos of the 1800s, the trees weren't here. I mean, there was trees here, but not like the forest is now. So we've come a long way that way. But I think as a global thing, I think we're at a tipping point where we might not be able to come back from. That's the thing that worries me.
I agree. There's so many moving parts. And so it's like we all have to say yes to the solution right now at the same time. And I just don't feel like some people are saying, yeah, they're not really saying yes to the solution. Yeah. And so it's going to make a difference. Yeah, it's not going to cut it.
Exactly. It causes me a lot of anxiety. It really does. Like you, I try to be optimistic, but at the same time, I think we're teetering on that precipice, like you said. And I think the reality of, if you just look at human nature and even something as stupid as like not being able to source toilet paper during the pandemic, that shows you how stupid we are, right? It takes that kind of weirdness to happen. Like people aren't going to really take it seriously, I feel like, until they no longer have clean water running out of their tap, or they can't get food anymore. You show up at the grocery store and here's all this amazing food that we just take for granted. You just walk in and buy whatever you want any time of year, berries that are sourced from halfway around the world, or, some exotic fruit, or, having greens all the time.
Yeah, I hear you. I have thought about that in particular, thinking like, like maybe there should be like a secondary price tag, right? That's like consumer information price tag, where there's like a carbon cost for your item. So it's really just like a guilt tag, like you can still buy it, or maybe there should be, an additional fee, an additional, oh my gosh, dare I say, tax that, somehow goes back to be a functional thing. But even if there wasn't a tax, at least a piece of information on the label, like we have our nutritional information, But, every product, like, especially like, it's like who doesn't love to have blueberries from Chile in the middle of winter? I love to eat them. I do. But you know what? I shouldn't be eating them. None of us should be eating them, right? What is the carbon cost of that product to have that on our shelf? And is there some way knowing that could help consumers to educate consumers to make a choice to not contribute to the problem? Because it's going to have to be, as long as there's demand, until the water doesn't come out of the tap anymore, there's always going to be someone selling to meet that demand. So the only way to change the demand is, I think, through education. I mean, would you stop eating fruit that's flown from halfway across the world so you can eat it when it's not in season here?
I'm like you. I walk into Costco and I'm like, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, strawberries. And I know I shouldn't do it, but I'd still do it, right? Same thing with plastic. Plastic is the thing that drives me out of my mind every single day. I just want to lose. It makes me almost lose control because I'm sorting, we recycle, and then I put all this stuff in a bin, and then I realize that, the people that do all my recycling, some of the stuff they don't even recycle, or it's being shipped halfway across the world, like it's probably a moot point, right? It's like, yeah, I'm recycling this, but then it's been shipped to some third world country to be processed or whatever. And the amount of gas and resources that was used in order to recycle it, totally, it's more than what the process of recycling is. It's just, it makes me crazy.
It does too. It's a big one for me also. Although I did on a more optimistic note, I forget what chain it was, but there's some grocery chain that is going to be trying something that is like a staple of, food co-ops for decades now, which is to have bulk items that you can go in with your reusable container to refill on products, whatever kind of liquid products that you might buy one-use plastic in. Again, if consumers start demanding it, it would happen. But I don't know how to make people make that leap. So I'm with you on that. I remember back when I was a kid, I had my favorite kind of yogurt was Dan and coffee yogurt. Always a coffee addict since the time I could walk. And they came in waxed paper cups that had little tops that were kind of, compressed over them. I just have to ask. It's like, I know that paper comes from trees and that's another issue. I get it, but it's better than plastic. Why can't we just go back to more of that? What's it going to take? I know there's an international push right now to limit, to start to do away with one-use plastic objects, and different countries have signed on. But, like emissions control, it's like, the date is, I don't know when the date is, but it's not tomorrow. So like,
it's not soon enough, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Just think if grocery stores didn't have plastic bags available, they just stopped carrying it. Well, then people would figure it out like, hey, I got to bring my own bag in, or, you use the paper bags, and maybe, like here in Colorado, or at least I think in Denver, there's a surcharge if you're going to use plastic bags, right?
Right.
We'll carry it out, or hopefully we remember our bags. And the worst case scenario, I'll use a paper bag. But even if you charge for the paper bags, right, 10 cents a paper bag or what have you to kind of offset that. But yeah, the plastic thing really, really does drive me out of my mind. Is that the reason why, like some of your earlier jewelry, you utilize that plastic like you were talking about, that you no longer want to use that? You're using more like natural objects in your jewelry?
Yep. Exactly. I in 2012 and I think up until 2013, I was using a polymerized plastic. It's like a dip. And I just wasn't, I wasn't really thinking about it. I just thought, well, this is a cool material. I like what it does. I really wasn't thinking about it. And now I just, I absolutely just can't. That's what when you see accents of red, I could paint that on. That could be done, but the particular plastic kind of created sort of like it's more viscous, so it creates sort of like a webbing in between structures. I mean, it's an interesting material, but not interesting enough, right, for me to ignore how really bad that particular product is for the environment. So I am not. The last time I used it was, just about 10 years ago now.
I'm looking at this piece, Red Weather 1, and you kind of described some of the elements already with it without us mentioning the piece. And it's a beautiful piece. And it's cool to see the evolution of, where you started and the ideas and where you're going with it. I think it would have been a really intriguing exhibition to see.
Well, I hope that people, even though the works are fairly different, it's hard for me to say, of course, because I have such a, I made them. So it's hard to have that objective eye, but I hope that people who see the work or saw the work can see that it's the same maker and can see some ideas that are leaping through the pieces, that there is a kind of a continuity of thought, even though ultimately, the pieces are mostly abstract. There are, so I hope so. It's hard that was kind of the bummer because it was still a COVID exhibition. So there wasn't an opening with, like a proper opening. It was, you could go, but they didn't have an event. So, I kind of missed that experience of having the shared experience of taking in art together, right? People being able to, and whether you're speaking with someone else about it or you're overhearing snippets of what other people are saying, just being in a room of humans interacting with art is like a great thing. I really miss it. It's been a while.
I love these pieces because they really are arresting, and they are, I would imagine, have you worn this particular piece out ever?
Yes.
And do people stop you and want to, talk about it? I mean, it's a conversation starter, I would think.
Yeah. People oftentimes, will say, can I touch it? Is that okay? Like, yeah, sure. It's not obviously it's not, these are not everyday pieces. And I have had collectors who buy pieces to put on the wall and not to wear them. And that's fine too. But I do have this desire to do a photo shoot on the subway in New York where you've got like a row of people sitting, along a stretch of seats where every single person is wearing like a really bold, outrageous piece of art jewelry, just like one after the other, but they're all just, sitting on the subway. It's kind of a goal of mine. I'll get to that at some point.
Sounds like a great performance piece.
So again, it's like, I have to have the right event. I'm not going to wear it to the grocery store. Maybe I should.
Yeah. and instead of the little description of, what it took, the carbon footprint in the interim, you can be wearing one of these beautiful pieces to the grocery store and, engage with people.
Right.
But you're probably like me. There's times I just want to get in and get out. I don't want to engage with anybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to make friends at the grocery store. It's true.
We're going to start to wrap this up, but I want to talk about some of the newer work that I saw on your website here. And you're going to be, for people that are listening, if you want to go to the wall work section of Thea's website here. I love this piece, Storm Flower. Is this whole series, this was all done last year?
Yeah, primarily 2021. Some of it end of 2020.
Is this the first time that you kind of delved into something like this this amount of work?
Yes. So, I mean, this is really like an assemblage piece, right? It's like elements adhered to, in this case, paper. Could just as easily be on a panel, I guess, but it happens to be on paper. It's very three-dimensional. And this is one of those, this piece contains a couple of objects that I've had. I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you how long. Like there's a piece of painted wood that I found somewhere. I've had that at least 10 years. I mean, just waiting for there to be, the right thing at the right time. I wanted to work with materials that are, that are reused mostly and repurposed in some way. And I wanted to have work that could be on the wall, but mostly they refuse to be truly two-dimensional. Many of them are still three-dimensional.
We're looking at a piece called Storm Flower. The element that really jumps out at me in this piece, and I love it because your eye wanders, it's around and you kind of take in all the different elements, but you got the main thing that grabs your eye is this thing. It's a scouring pad. How did you go about deciding that you were going to incorporate the scouring pad?
So the larger of the red, there's like that central red element. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
So that's actually found fabric. I don't even know what that is. It's some kind.
Oh, okay.
And I literally found it on the street. But the scouring pad are the 4 elements that come off of it that I applied beadwork to. So this kind of resembles, the heart with the arrows through it, which is a kind of a symbol that while it may have different meanings, it's just like a strong visual symbol. So I had that sort of heart-shaped or bulb-shaped fabric that I was using. And when the elements came together and it was clear that it was going to have this, I was going to utilize that. That's a print from a vintage book of a gladiola, which gladiola is are sometimes referred to as sword flowers, like gladiola, like gladiator, because they're long stalk-like flowers. So when I knew I was going to use the gladiola flower for this and that kind of bulb-like, heart-like fabric below it, the scouring pad, again, something I've had in a drawer for a really long time. And it's just a moment of making that intuitive connection of this is a pop of color. I can cut this into the shape that I want it. It's something that I have readily available, and I can do addition of beadwork into it. So I can further, add some additional details that will draw the eye in and maybe pick up some of the other colors that I'm using. So it's just kind of a perfect storm of, ideas. The element of the gladiola was a book that I found in a thrift store, an old publication. And so that was the sort of the starting point for this piece, knowing that I wanted to use that particular image, and then the rest kind of flowed out from there.
I love it. It's great. Yeah, I thought the piece of material, the wool or whatever, was the scouring pad. I thought it was like an old steel wool pad that you decided not to discard, and because that's a thing that just goes in the trash. You use it till it's used up, and then boom, it's done. It's in landfill.
Right.
But interesting. I love this piece. There's a couple other pieces that really are striking here. I like this one, Untitled One.
Yeah, thank you. There's some text in that on the top circle. It says, actually I have it here. It says, dirt and dust are blown away. And so I have the background paper, the white of the circles, was paper that I saved, packaging paper that I saved from, I swear it's probably 25 years old. And it's this slit packaging paper. You can buy it, but I've just had it. And I've used it before in a rolling mill in my jewelry studio, which is like two steel rollers that I can use to compress pieces of metal together. And I can put different elements like paper or fabric in between the metal, and it'll emboss the texture onto the metal. And that's primarily what I had been using this paper for, is to emboss into metal. But in 2021, I started utilizing the slits that are in this paper to weave other fabric and paper through to make these structures. So that is, that's essentially what I have here. And it's a collection of some isobar maps that I printed when I did some printing, and I painted over them with gouache. And so I've just, combined a lot of these elements, some fabric that I used in another jewelry piece that was like a vintage fabric also got incorporated. So this is a kind of piece that I think it has some impact when you see it from a distance, but when the closer you get to it, the more you see.
And they all these pieces, are they about the same size of this new work?
Some of them are smaller, but like that one is an earlier one with this woven, weaving through this slit paper.
Mm-hmm.
This one is smaller, like maybe 9 by 7 or something.
Oh, it says 9 by 5.5 inches. So yeah, it's a relatively small piece, right?
It is. So the fun thing about this piece is, this uses some cyanotype on silk that's woven in through there, but there are yellow circles on there. So I was walking around an outdoor strip mall in Greensboro where I live, and this it was some kind of polymerized coating, which was on the sidewalk, kind of like traction where you would step off the curve, was cracking from just being worn and old and weathered. And so I peeled some off and brought it home, and it was already cracked. And then I was able to, so it's like about 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe a little less. And like 1/8 of an inch thick, I should say. And I was able to cut it with a jeweler's saw and use it.
Wow. That's so cool. And this piece that we're talking about right now is called Deep Under. This is one of my favorites, along with this one, Darwin Tulips. It's just, It's a stunning, stunning piece.
So I found this, it's going to the thrift stores is kind of a archaeological event, especially when you can tell some people have just like cleaned out their parents' house, and you see like collections of books about fly fishing or, whatever their particular hobbies were. You've got, those kinds of assortments of collections from time to time. So there's this, this sort of strangeness to it in that way. But I did find this really wonderful book. Someone's parent was obviously a gardener and had a collection of gardening books. And this particular one, books printed in the 30s and the 40s have such great color quality. So I snapped that up and really became a source of inspiration. It's so funny because I used to kind of poo-poo floral things in art. I just sort of thought, they're purely decorative and usually overdone, and I didn't find them particularly interesting. But I am finding myself now drawn to these sort of alternative landscapes that incorporate, floral imagery. So that's kind of what we see here. It's a sort of an actual beautiful print of a photograph of these purple tulips, and then this found fabric on top of a piece of found, weird acrylic from the sidewalk that I was able to sew through, kind of mimicking the flower. Again, just the idea that nature is mutating with climate change.
I love it.
Yeah,
I really
that's a
do.
good one. Yeah.
You're on board with that, Wes Brown?
Yeah, I am. I like this one.
Wes and I usually have pretty similar tastes when
Yeah.
it comes to looking at art. So, and all of these are still available for sale?
They are.
All varying in pricing, or have you even priced out these pieces?
They are varying in prices based on, the amount of hours that I've spent there. I've only framed one of them, so they're all primarily unframed at this time. And because they have elements on it, they would probably need some kind of like shadow box type of frame on them.
Yeah, I could see that. What would you say the price range would be from small to like larger pieces? Or do you even have any idea at this juncture of the game?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to have to reserve that. I mean, I have a piece that was in a show. I think it was kind of probably the piece that the one with the two circles that we were just talking about. That one was framed. But it was also framed with like really expensive museum acrylic. So it's like non-glare, non-breakable, expensive acrylic for ship because I had to ship it to Virginia for a show. Mm. So that one, I think I priced at, $1,100 or something.
Do you have collectors? You've been doing this for a while now, and I imagine showing in all the places that you have.
So I would say that is a continual challenge because although a lot of the places that I show are, they're not doing sales necessarily. Like if someone is interested, they may refer someone. And I have sold out of galleries, but I have sold out of exhibitions, but I do not have collectors yet of this very newest work because I have barely shown it and hasn't really been out there. The wall work from 2021. I do have people who have purchased my work, but I have not, continued over the years. I haven't kept up my mailing list from all of those years. Really bad business person, really bad. I get definitely an F in that category. So yeah, I have to get up to speed on the 21st century and, put together a mailing list. But I've been doing like shows where I've sold work. I did that for a long time. And I used to make a nice, handy little living. I would do like 9 shows a year between retail and wholesale. But I'm not doing that kind of showing of my work right now. So when I was doing that, yes, I had people come and, I had people who loved cufflinks and I would, they were like, oh, can you do this as a cufflink? And I would make them cufflinks or I would, the last show I've sold some big pieces through the Smithsonian craft show. So, when you get into the right show, you can get in front of collectors who know that they want to buy one of a kind strange art jewelry. And I've sold through galleries, but currently because I don't have a gallery and I'm not doing shows, I don't feel really connected to any of these people. So that's my, kind of my to-do list as I regroup here in North Carolina and figure out the best way to show my work here going forward. The whole thing about shows is that they stopped like everything else during the pandemic. And then people sort of started doing it online. Some of these shows were done online, which to me, I was not really ready to do because I didn't have that kind of work for those particular kinds of shows. So what am I saying? I'm saying selling work is something I would like to do more of, and it's a work in progress. And selling art jewelry is challenging in the best of circumstances. which is another reason why I'm expanding to work that can be shown in more places, right? To create more opportunity to connect with collectors. So.
Gotcha. So when people do buy your work, a lot of times you said they either buy it from these exhibitions that they've seen or shows or what have you. But do you make sales off your website? Do people peruse your website and buy stuff from you?
Yeah, I have. And that's, pretty much how I sold one of the pieces from the Cryosphere So Blue was through my website. So my website is not set up as a shop at the moment. And I'm not saying that won't change, but I think that right now my focus is more on connecting to the art community where I am, and so that I show in the places that are available to me here in North Carolina. So doing residencies is one way to kind of get my work out there, connect with those different kinds of entities. So I have a residency I've planned, but one of the ways, the other thing I do is I try to find more of those kinds of opportunities. It's like a combination of building up your resume and getting your name out there so that people ask you to do more shows. That's all great. I mean, ultimately, I think I could probably put a little bit more energy into how to sell. And I'm not sure what that looks like right now. Because I feel like, there are more avenues than ever before for artists to sell with the internet. But are people selling big art pieces on the internet? Maybe they are. And I'm just like the only one who doesn't know about it.
I think people did pretty well during the pandemic with online art sales from what we've, the people that we've talked to, the artists we've talked to. They all found that during the pandemic, they actually had, if not their best year, one of their best years. I don't know how that's changed in the last year per se, in 2021, if that was still the case. And if that will continue into 2022, I know that now that, things are opening up a little bit more, they're going back to, the old way of doing things per se, but they still have the online in their back pocket and still are moving art that way.
Yeah. Is it mostly reproduction work that they're selling online, or are they selling original?
Mostly, I would say original.
I would say too. Yeah, Wes, original works. I know that if you lived here, you would get a show in a heartbeat, especially with that new work, because it's very accessible. Denver has a very thriving art scene, and you would have no problem finding a gallery that, would give you a show or, would represent you as one of their artists. I see that new work that you did in 2021 and 2020, you'd sell it all. What do you think, Wes?
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
It's so unique. There's so much great stuff going on with it, and the thought behind it, and it's just stunning. So, I mean, when I saw that, I was very excited to talk with you about it.
Well, that is really awesome and cool. But hey, if Denver is happening, I've actually never been to Colorado. Would love to have a visit. I have relatives in Colorado who I've not been out to see. I would like to cast a wide net in terms of representation for the work that I've made. And it's really just a matter of, feeling like I have a large enough body of work that I can then, start to put it out there. And so I think I think it's happening. Just have to get down to it. Had to stop and make some more jewelry, but now that I'm done making the jewelry, I can kind of get back to some more wall work. So yeah, I'll definitely check out the scene that's there. I know a lot of the times gallerists like to work with local people, but they also like people they think might sell. So you never know.
I think at least the galleries that Todd and I've been to, and Todd lives in Denver and I don't, but they're very open to carrying people from all over.
Yeah.
Virginia, so no, I don't think you would have, once again, I'm not the one making the decision, but I see your work online and it's great. And I can see I could see a number of galleries that are in Denver picking up some of your work.
Cool. I think, the thing is, like, if you're an artist and you're venturing into new territory, it just takes time to not only build up enough work that you feel strongly enough about, but to also to just get the balls to just do it, to just put it out there. When it comes to the work that I've been doing for the last 20 years, I'm like a known entity, and I feel like I can approach anyone about what I do because I've got a track record, right? So it's always, there's always a little bit of that getting out of your own way to make things happen.
Right.
So the work that you're going to be working on coming up, you just said that you finished up making a bunch of jewelry. Are you going to continue the wall work? Are you exploring new materials and mediums? This is what I love about you, is that you're always exploring. To me, those are the most exciting artists. I don't want to see the same thing over and over again. Right. And I think that's what resonates with me with your work. Not only is it just incredible work, but you're putting yourself out there and you're pushing it and exploring new avenues and new materials and doing different things. That's what excites me about your work.
Thanks. I'm definitely continuing with wall work, and I also have plans to do larger installation with the fiber on walls. And I have one thing I really like about Greensboro so far is I have a studio outside my house, and in it, it's a building that has other artists in it. So I've already collaborated with an amazing woodworker, and I was able to design a bed that he made, which was very, very cool to have a drawing and give him the drawing and have this large thing materialize. It was really, really cool. And there's another artist there who works in metal, larger welded. He's does welding. And if I could wave my magic wand, I would start to work on a larger scale and maybe toward public art. And that may be that I just make, the small maquette, and then someone else is going to do the fabricating. Because I think that's totally doable. If you've ever been a project manager on any kind of project, you kind of learn what it takes to organize. And, but you have to get something done, have it on your resume in order to open up more doors. So I think that would be one of my long-term goals while I'm here, because I feel like I have accessibility to a variety of collaborators and fabricators. And so that's a long-term goal. But for the immediate, I am continuing with the wall work and just challenging myself, right? I like to, if something makes me a little bit uncomfortable, then I think there's probably some growth that would happen if I pursued that. I should definitely push that. So areas where I feel reticent, like I said, it's getting bigger for me feels counterintuitive, a little bit hard, a little bit uncomfortable. I kind of want to keep collapsing the size of things. And so I really feel like I know that there's something good on the other side of that reticence. So, for this year, that I think, what I really would like to do is go bigger, baby.
Go big or go home, as they say.
You beat me to the punchline, Wes.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Oh, Thea, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening and talking about your work. It's extraordinary. I'm so glad that Brian from the museum reached out to us and said, hey, I think you guys would be interested in talking with this artist. And as soon as he gave his little he sold you really well, just so you know. And as soon as I read his little synopsis of, about your art and the exhibit and all that, I'm like, I'm sold. And then I went to your website. Even before I went to your website, I was like, this is spectacular. So shout out to Brian.
Ryan.
Museum. Thank you. Thank you for spending so much time with us. If people want to purchase work from you, is the best way via your website?
Yes, they can contact me through my website.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you guys.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. And you know what? If you make your way out to Colorado, definitely hit us up. Be happy to, spend a day doing art related things and showing you some of the wonderful galleries you have here. We have wonderful museums, and it'd be great to see you in person.
May actually seriously take you up on that. So yeah, I'll send you a text so I won't just knock on your door. But absolutely, I'd love to do an art evening, first Friday, head out. That would be great. That'd be really great.
Yeah, it'd be fun to hang out with you and look at art together. That would be a blast.
Hey, do you get to Denver sometimes too, Wes? Or
yeah, as much as I can. Right now, my mom is she's 81 and is in the twilight of her life, so we're dealing with that. She moved in with us last June, and but so it slowed me down to getting to Denver. But yeah, I still make it to Denver quite regularly, and if you're going to be in the area, I would definitely make my best effort to get there.
Denver party.
Again, check out Thea's website, theaclark.com. I will have all the information in this week's episode notes. For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.